let's wrap this shit up. Hello everyone. My name is Shelby. Welcome back to my channel, Grace with Books. Today I am doing my 2019 wrap-up. Whoa. This year flew by. Had so many cool experiences. I finished up my first year of college and began my second. I started this booktube channel. I have opened myself to so many new experiences, and it's just been a really healthy year for me, actually. And I can't wait to see how that grows in 2020. So today I thought I'd give you guys my summary of the year book-wise. I'm not going to go through every single book I read because that would take forever for me to say and to edit, and you guys probably wouldn't enjoy it that much. So I'm gonna give you guys an overview of my year and some statistics, things like that, and I promise I'll make it fun. It's not just gonna be like boring. I hope it's not boring. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do today, and I'm really excited because it's sort of nice to do a wrap-up video because it just shows how much you've accomplished in the past year, and it's super cool. So let's get to it. In 2019, I read 100 books. Whoa. I set out to read 100 books and I did, and I'm really proud of myself because it's a big accomplishment. If you want like an average, I read about 8 books a month, give or take, so that finally got me to my total, which is pretty cool. Over the year, I read about 95 physical / ebooks, and I listened to 5 audiobooks. That's good because prior to this, I had listened to 0 audiobooks. So it is something that I definitely wanted to accomplish this year, and I did. I had a lot of reading goals for the year. I accomplished some, I didn't accomplish some, and that's honestly my fault because I set 10 goals for myself this year, which was too many. I'm only setting 5 for myself next year because it gives me a little more room to play around. So I'm going to tell you guys the ones I accomplished and the ones I did not. So first, I did read 5 books I already owned at the beginning of the year. I read Caraval, Ash Princess, Daughter of the Pirate King, Shadow and Bone, and Night Circus. So those were 5 books I owned in 2018 that I didn't get to read, so I read those in 2019. Another one of my goals this year was to finish Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, and I did. Kingdom of Ash was the first book I read in December, and I finished it, and I loved it, and it was great. And that also helps me complete my goal, finish a series that I've already started, so that's pretty awesome. So I was able to finally finish the Throne of Glass series. It definitely took me so long to read, but I did it, and I'm really proud of myself because I really did love the series and I just could never find time to read the books. Next up, I did read a historical fiction novel. I read Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerri Maniscalco, and I was a little iffy about it at first, but as I kept reading, I really enjoyed it, so I'm really happy that I picked it up, and that was my one of my first historical fictions ever. I guess you could also count The Night Circus as a historical fiction. It's a little more on the fantasy side, while Stalking Jack the Ripper has less of that. So I consider Jack the Ripper a more historical fiction book, but yeah, I'm really proud of myself for that as well. It's a new genre I really want to get into. I also had on this list to listen to 1 audiobook. I listened to 5 this year. I listened to 6 of Crows, Crooked Kingdom, The Bells, The Everlasting Rose, and A Gathering of Shadows. So those were 5 audiobooks I read this year. I was only expecting to listen to 1, so extra checks for that one. I did not get a chance to reread The Mortal Instruments, which is something I really wanted to do this year. I just never had time. I had so many new books I wanted to read. I never went back to reread those books, so maybe I'll try to do that this year, but I do definitely want to delve into that world again. It's been a while since I picked up the first book, City of Bones, so I definitely want to get back into the Mortal Instruments series. I also didn't get a chance to read any books by the Bronte sisters. I really want to push myself to read more classics, but it didn't happen, which is sad for me because I kept putting it off to read more fantasy style books because that's a genre I'm comfortable with and tend to like more. So pushing myself to read any classic this year is really a goal. I'm not going to set it to just the Bronte sisters. I just want to read at least 1 classic because I really am trying to broaden my literary horizons. So that is definitely a goal of mine for 2020, but did not get to it in 2019. I did read and review more than 10 NetGalley books, which was a goal of mine. I definitely wanted to use that resource, which is a very nice resource to have. Like, reading arcs of books and reviewing them for the authors is super cool. So I definitely wanted to do that more this year, and I read over 10 books via NetGalley for books that hadn't been released yet. I liked some of the books I read from them. I did not like some of the books I read for them, but it was really interesting getting able to read these books before they were released. released. So I'm really grateful for that resource and that I am pre-approved for so many publishers, but I definitely want to continue doing it in 2020 to push myself more on that platform. So yeah, we'll see. My 9th goal for the year was to read one new release every single month. I think I accomplished that more or less. The release might not have been from the month that I read it, but I did read like a new release from 2019 every single month, which I found pretty impressive. That definitely became easier when I subscribed to FairyLoot in June because they do give you a new release every single month in one of their boxes, so I was able to read some really great books that I don't think I would have picked up otherwise, which is a really cool thing. So I'm really grateful for having that subscription, and thank you Grandma for getting me that subscription. And then finally my 10th goal of 2019 was to read 100 books, which I did, which is super cool. I'm really proud of myself because I think I accomplished most of the goals on my list. There was just a few things that I didn't get to, but overall, pretty good year. To get more into like the specifics, this year I read 73 fantasy books. Now this could be historical fantasy, paranormal, sci-fi. I sort of grouped it all together under fantasy. Anything that like is unlikely to happen in our mundane world, I grouped that under fantasy, but I read 73 books like that. I read 18 contemporaries, which is more than I thought I read because I don't read a lot of contemporaries, but I read 18, which is pretty impressive for me. I read 1.5 historical fiction books. I'm counting The Night Circus as like a half, but of course the full one I read was Stalking Jack the Ripper, so 1.5 historical fiction books, and I read 8 plays. I read a lot of plays for classes and for my major. I'm a theater major, so I started putting those into Goodreads about halfway through the year. I've definitely read more than that, but I didn't really count them as like Goodreads books until I realized I'm reading, I should be counting them. So I counted about 8 of the plays I read this year as on this list. So I read about 8 plays, which was really cool. The longest book I read this year was Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. Lord, that was a long book. It was 984 pages, and honestly, while I was reading it, I didn't think it would ever end. It always just seemed to have so many more pages, which was good because it was such a rich story, and every second I felt so entrapped in the entire world. It was amazing, but it was so long. And the shortest book I read this year was actually a play called All My Sons by Arthur Miller, and that was 84 pages, I believe. So that was my tiniest book of the year. The most popular book I read this year was when I reread Harry Potter for the Reading Rush, which of course is the most popular book on my list. And the least popular book I read was actually The Little Book of Big Feelings by Marzie Wilson. This was a book I got from NetGalley, and it is a book from this illustrator named Marzie who creates these really great introvert doodles, and she created a whole book about them and feelings, and it's really wonderful. So that hasn't been released yet, or maybe it has been released, I'm not sure. It's very new, so not a lot of people have reviewed it yet, so that's my least popular book I read this year. The first book I read this year, in the entire year, was The Shadow Queen by C.J. Redwine, and I gave that book 3 stars. It definitely was not a favorite. I was a little upset because I felt like I was starting the year off on a bad note by reading a book I didn't really like, but obviously the year got better. The last book I read this year was The Toll by Neal Shusterman, and I gave that 5 stars because it was just such an epic conclusion of the Arc of a Scythe series. So the year ended on a really good note for me, so super happy with that. The last thing I'm going to talk to you guys about is my favorite book of the year. I hate doing this because I find it so hard to pick a favorite book of the year. It hurts me in my soul, but I have tried to make it easier for myself. I have in my 2019 bullet journal a spread here called Book of the Month, where every month I look at the books I've read and I pick my favorite book from that list. From these 12 books, I am going to pick my favorite book. So let me tell you guys the finalists. Okay. In January, my favorite book was The Wicked King by Holly Black. In February, my favorite book was A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Koemmerer. In March, my favorite book was If There's No Tomorrow by Jennifer L. Armentrout. In April, my favorite book was Gemina by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. In May, my favorite book was Paper Girls by Cindy R. Wilson. In June, my favorite book was Scythe by Neal Shusterman. In July, I just forgot like the order of the months. In July, my favorite book was Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. In August, my favorite book was Legendary by Stephanie Garber. In September, my favorite book was Aurora Rising by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. In October, my favorite book was Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin. In November, my favorite book was Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. And in December, my favorite book was Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. So from those 12 books, I am right now going to pick my top 3 and then my favorite book of the year. Oh my god. I might cry while doing this, honestly. I hate picking a favorite book, but I feel like it's a good thing to do. I need to learn to make choices. Okay, I have the top 6 right now. We're still narrowing it down. Okay. Okay, so I have my top 3 books, and those are Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson, Aurora Rising by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, and Scythe by Neal Shusterman. Okay. I'm literally doing this in the moment, so you know, like, I have not prepared for this. So, the final 2 are Sorcery of Thorns and Scythe. These books both have so many great things about them. Scythe really just made me think. Like, it is a book that challenged me as an intellectual. It made me think about society and the meaning of death and what does it mean if there is no death. It made me question my entire life, basically, and I loved the entire concept and the world that Neal Shusterman created. Sorcery of Thorns was just magical. It filled me as a book lover with so much joy and heart. It is a book that made me love libraries and books, and I loved how they portrayed librarians as these badass people, because they are. And it was just so magical. I loved every second of it. As a standalone, it had to encompass an entire world in one book, and I think it did that beautifully. So, which one am I going to pick for my favorite book of 2019? I hate this so much. Okay, my favorite book of 2019 is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. Here's why I picked it. First of all, I love Scythe with all my heart. If I could tie them, I would, but I had to get better at picking things, so I picked this one. One of the reasons I picked it was because this was actually released in 2019. Scythe was released last year, I believe. But as good as it is, it was so challenging and wonderful intellectually. But Sorcery of Thorns got me on an emotional level. And it is a book that I really appreciated and I just thought was wonderful. The characters and the world building, all the little details made me fall more in love with this epic fantasy book. I thought it was just a brilliantly written piece, and I'm really happy it's my favorite book of the year. And this is the Fairy Loot edition, so it has blue sprayed edges, which makes it even more pretty. But yeah, so this is my favorite book of 2019. I hope you enjoyed this wrap up. I know I did. It's sort of fun to look back and see what you've accomplished in the past year. It is sort of cathartic and healing, so then you can prepare for the next year. And I really enjoyed looking at all of the things I read this month and really making decisions about them. I'm glad I picked a favorite book of the year because I didn't think I was going to be able to. But yeah, so if you liked this video, please let me know your favorite books of the year, your statistics down below. Please share with me your Goodreads username so I can friend you and we can see each other's 2019 year in review. And that is all I have. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Hit the notification bell to get updates on when I post. I post every single Monday and Thursday, and I cannot wait to see you guys in the new year. So I'll see you guys next year. Have an amazing day. Bye!